Hi, I am Anissa Jackson, and today I will be touching on anorexia nervosa. I am in the Psych 266 Abnormal Disorders class, and I want to simply talk about this due to the fact that I have witnessed someone I'm very close to go through this disorder, so I want to shed some light on, what she went through from the perspective of someone who had to watch it happen. And I really feel like it's just not talked about enough. Maybe medically, sure, but in a worldly view, it's not. And there's a lot of careless jokes that are made when this is a very serious disorder and the cases are becoming very rampant. So I just feel like this is a good way to spread awareness on that. The Mayo Clinic provides some of the symptoms that one suffering with this may go through. So to dive in, I wanted to start off by reading a few just to give you a general idea. Starting with the denial of hunger or making excuses for not eating, maybe even eating only a certain safe foods, usually low in fat and calories. One may adopt a rigid meal or eating rituals such as spitting food out after chewing, or maybe they just don't want to eat in public. Even down to lying about how much food has been eaten, maybe fearing weight gain. They may repeatedly weigh themselves or measure the body. Frequent checking in the mirror for perceived flaws, complaining about being fat or having body parts that are fat. And even things like being anemic, having heart problems, abnormal heart rate, bone loss, loss of muscle, things like that. So it's very serious, very, very, very serious. And this has the highest death rate out of any mental illness at this point in time. And we will touch a little bit more on that in a second. According to the DSM-5, though, anorexia nervosa is characterized by recurrent food refusal, which leads to dangerously low body weight. People with anorexia place a high value on controlling their weight and shape using extreme efforts that tend to significantly interfere with their lives. This may also include excessive exercise. The cause for this is unknown, unfortunately, as it could stem from, psychological or environmental factors. For example, people with anorexia nervosa tend to have other mental disorders such as like depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorders, personality disorders, or even alcohol and substance misuse. And with that being said, that's where the rigidness, perfectionism, the rituals, that's where that psychological factor comes in. But then there's also the environmental factor side of things where we have social media. Social media is over here applauding, certain figures while shaming others. We have, the algorithm, which helps certain people, see certain things. So now this person wants to try this extreme dieting because that's what they're seeing. Who got these flawless results. It's sickening. It's poisoning to teenagers nowadays. NBC News states that according to the CDC, hospitalizations for eating disorders spiked during the pandemic, doubling amongst adolescent girls. And this was also updated data from Trilliant Health that also states that from 2018 to mid-2022, visits amongst the ages of 17 and younger jumped to 107.4% across all eating disorders. And the visits went from about 50,000 at the beginning of 2018 to more than 100,000 in 2022. Now, I mentioned how anorexia has the highest death rate of any mental illness. That percentage also jumped to about 129.26%. That's huge increase. Anything over 100 is a huge increase. And the fact that this death rate is even at 100% is crazy. It's not okay. It's really unfortunate. I feel like this is due most likely to the fact that they already have other mental disorders. And then you add on the COVID isolation and the stress of COVID and losing family members. Now, if you have anxiety and depression, isolation, that's not, that's very, very imprisoning. And to put into another perspective, with isolation, COVID is also like an aid to this disorder. You don't really have to hide your secret. Like, you're already hidden. You're in isolation. You're not having to force yourself to eat something because you're with friends and you don't want to explain. You're not having to come up with an excuse for why you're not eating at family dinner. You just simply, if you really don't want to, you don't have to because of isolation. And that is also helping the spike with teenagers because that's who was affected the most during COVID-19. Now, the next thing that you may be thinking is, how do we solve this? How do we fix this? How do we heal this? And the way that we heal this is with cognitive behavioral therapy. This is suggested because a patient with anorexia nervosa already has distorted thoughts about shape and weight and the overvaluation of thinness. And these thoughts turn into the severe dieting, over exercise, trying to lose the weight. Cognitive behavioral therapy addresses these behavioral and distorted thoughts through normalizing the eating patterns, monitoring the food intake through food logs, collaborative problem solving, experiments, and overall cognitive reconstructing. It also includes the involvement of parents, teaches them how to monitor, pay attention to, any personal dilemmas that they may be dealing with overall so that they feel supported. This is coming from the National Library of Medicine, whereas there is not too much evidence on adolescent anorexia nervosa as far as how nutritional doctors and counseling are helpful, but they are recommended, highly recommended, to come up with a food plan, dietary counseling to help the eating regimens. But sometimes this can worsen the obsessions and the preoccupations with eating and weight. Also, according to the National Library of Medicine, SSRIs there was a high enthusiasm for using them. They were possibly useful to maybe prevent the weight loss, but study shows now that this may not be likely, as well as using antipsychotics because of the propensity to lead to the weight gain, have also been considered to possibly be useful. There's more data done on adults using these medications than adolescents, whereas they try to push more therapy, day programs, inpatient, residential type treatment. Next, I want to insert a few minutes of someone that I am very close with talking about their personal experience with this eating disorder and how they felt. I feel like this provides a real glimpse into the mind of someone who's had to deal with this to provide a really real and raw description of the experience. So I'm going to insert that in now.
My name is Cindy Cox. I am a junior at NEU. I am a strategics communication major with an emphasis in advertising. I would say that I started having issues with food my sophomore year of high school. I was never really like a skinny girl growing up. I was not a big girl either. I was just like heavier set. I would say when I went into high school, I kind of really never found a place where I'd fit in, and just like being the only black person among all my friends and just not like really fitting in physically wise, I started to feel that like my weight would be something I could change to like feel more in with my friends and feel like I like looked a part of the group. I also started smoking weed when I was a sophomore, and that did not help my eating case at all. There was one time which kind of set off my whole like eating disorder sophomore year, where I was smoking pretty heavy, and then my mom found out, and so I had to like abruptly stop. And then I barely ate for like 2 months. I lost like a lot of weight, and ever since like that point, like my weight has been fluctuating between like what it was and like how it is now. I just have also just become, even since sophomore year, kind of till this point now, have been very dependent on weed for my food, my sleep, and just like honestly just getting through the day. And so like when I don't have weed, or like I'm just going through a period where either I can't afford it or I couldn't get it since I was underage, where I would just want to eat food because I just taught my brain that I needed it in order to eat and in order to sleep. I could go days without sleeping if I didn't have it as well. I came to a breaking point in senior year where I hadn't had weed for like 4 days, meaning I barely slept for 4 days and had not eaten at all. So I came home very early in the morning. I think I was out, and I was crying to my mom, and I finally like told her like how bad it was, and she knew I was like smoking weed, but she never knew like I was dependent on it and really needed it to like get through the day. And like she understood, and she didn't want me to cut it off because she wanted me to be eating and like just have the basic things that I need to like survive, if that's something that I needed. At that point, my mom got me a therapist and a psychiatrist as well. I started talking to both of them. The psychiatrist then put me on depression pills and anxiety. One was propranolol, and I forget the other one. So I was on those for, I would say, about 8 months, and I talked to my therapist, I would say, for about a year. I would say that the therapy helped a lot, and I just feel like he told me a lot of things that I felt like I needed reassurance. He told me, like, one of my big things is that, like, I needed to find, like, a group. I wanted to find my belonging and, like, just feel like a part of something. Because just being biracial also has always been, like, a hard part for me, just not knowing what side or what people or accept me, and also just all of the above. Also went to a drug rehabilitatist or pill doctor, and they tried to talk to me about weed and stuff, and like I understood what they were talking about, but like it didn't really make me want to stop fully. The pills I did feel helped, the anxiety pills, but at a point I just stopped because I didn't really feel much of a change, and I just felt like I wanted to do it more on my own, and I just didn't want to get dependent on these pills. I'm still like struggling at this point, but not as bad as I was. Still do use weed some at times to, eat and just get through the day. I would say that therapy did help me a lot. I did have a lot of support with like my friends, well, a couple of my friends. I didn't have that much of a support system, to be completely honest, because I didn't really feel comfortable talking to people about this. I just never felt like people really understood where I was coming from, and I just never wanted people to think I'm trying to make them feel bad, because most people I talk to tend to be like a different size than me, and although we're different sizes, I feel like people tend to not understand where people who are skinnier come from when they say they have body issues. I just feel like people are always used to heavier set people having issues, and just like I just never felt comfortable. I never wanted people to feel bad or feel like I saw them in a different way if I thought that I looked bad and they were heavier than me, because I've had experiences with that. Like my mom has said to me, if you think that, what do you think I look like? And it's not like that at all. I think my mom is beautiful. It's just it's hard for me to see myself in that way. But overall, my mom was my main support system through it all. She made me feel comfortable with telling her things, and and she helped me create this little book of what I was eating, and she also helped me stop weighing myself so much and trying not to just care as much about the number of how much I weigh and rather just how I feel. Right now I'm really happy with my weight, and I don't feel like it's something that I've been worrying about too much. I'm really happy with how my journey has gone, I would say, and how I'm on my road to recovery, and I can see the end of my struggle hopefully coming to a near end. Thank you.
Huge thank you to Sydney for that amazing testimony. That is one of my best friends, so I am so thankful and glad that she was so brave to share her experience with not just me, but also you. With that being said, I wanted to touch on how are some ways that we can support our loved one or someone that we know who is going through such a horrible disorder, in time in their life. And The number one thing I could say is, when you're in doubt, ask, what can I do to help? Ask how they're feeling. Listen openly, reflectively, having patience and being non-judgmental. Validate their feelings and their emotional pain and keep that a secret when it's shared with you. It's not for everyone. It's really hard for them to talk about. Like she said, it's really uncomfortable. Just because, we may not understand what they are going through, that does not mean we should take how we think they should feel and put that on them. Refraining from telling the person what they should do. Always reach out. How are things going? Expressing concerns that arise, but not being condescending about why they're in the situation and why can't you fix this? Really just focusing on the emotional aspects of the eating disorder and not just the physical ones. It's huge. And taking care of yourself and your own thoughts is huge too. I will say, dealing with this and watching her struggle, and watching the decline, we've been friends since third grade. It's hard. And sometimes you do have to remind yourself recovery is long, it's not a sprint, it's not a walk in the park. Sometimes you can't really take their actions personally, and sometimes you do have to set boundaries to preserve yourself. It is okay to be there, for someone, but don't lose yourself in the process. I feel like these can go a long way with more than just disorders. Anyone dealing with anything mentally trying, just a little support can go a long way in feeling, not alone. And so I think that is a huge reason as to why, she's struggling less. I agree with her. I think we're at the end of the tunnel, and I hope that a lot of people who are dealing with this disorder can see the light at the end of the tunnel too, because there is a way to fix this. And if you are dealing with this disorder, never hesitate to reach out for help, because there is always someone who is willing to help. I am Anissa Jackson, and that is my take on anorexia nervosa. I hope you're able to take a few things away from this podcast, as well as really be able to get a feel for what it's like to live with the disorder. Thank you.